And notice the economics of diminishing returns in verse 10. 10 acres shall yield but one bath. A homer of seed shall yield a mere ephah. Well, we're not too familiar with those measurements, but it's very bad returns. It is the more you sow, the less you will get. Exactly the opposite ratio of what parable? So, all of these images you see are stories people are familiar with when Jesus is talking. That's the difference. The stories we know are the stories of the advertisements and the 6 o'clock news and the soapies. If we were to make allusions to that, we'd all be chuckling. But in Mark's time, Jesus is making allusions to these kinds of stories because everybody knows them. And what he is doing, you see, is he's re-narrating them, but with that prophetic twist. So let's look at what he does in chapter 12. Now keep your thumb in Isaiah 5, because we're going to have to flip back and forth. A man planted a vineyard, put a fence around it, dug a pit for the winepress, built a watchtower. So far, so good? And then what did he do? He leased it out to tenants. Huh? That's not in Isaiah. You see, so your ears prick up. Uh-oh. Somebody's throwing us a curve here. And now the parable departs in a new direction. And the problem is that he became an absentee landlord who couldn't trust his tenants. Because every time he sent in the trucks to pick up the produce to sell to market so that he could extract the profits from the land and drain off the surplus, what do the tenants keep trying to do? Yeah, they didn't like that arrangement. They didn't like that surplus extraction by foreign corporations and absentee landlords. Who were the good guys and the bad guys? Think about it in this parable. They seized him and beat him and sent him away empty-handed. So he sent another slave, and they beat him up again. And then he sent another one. They beat him too. And he had at last a beloved son. Now this is where we get a little confused because we know, yeah, beloved son, that must mean Jesus. But who is the beloved in Isaiah's parable? The beloved of Israel. He sent a beloved son. Surely they respect him. So the tenants started plotting revolution. And what do they say? What do they have to do in order to gain deed to the land? Yeah. All they have to do is murder the legal inheritor. Remember the politics of inheritance? What must I do to inherit? You see, land is passed on among the landed, among the latifundialization process, by inheritance. And tenants, being the disenfranchised, know how that system works. So how are they going to get a piece of that action? Wipe out the inheritors. And that actually was land law in first century Palestine. If for some reason the legal inheritor passes away, then tenants, and there are no other legal heirs, then tenants get squatters' rights. So the tenants aren't stupid. Tenants are very shrewd. They're plotting. And they say, let's kill him. Then we can finally get our land back. So that's what they do. Well, that's kind of like Isaiah's parable, but kind of different too. Because it's all about the struggle over land and the deed to land by tenants. so Jesus goes on and he says, now what do you think the owner of the vineyard will do? Who's he talking to? He's just telling a story. And now he asks this question of his audience. Who's he talking to? Well, that's exactly what verse 12 says. They realized that this parable was told against them. And now who is they? That's exactly right. Chapter 11, verse 27. He was walking in the temple. The chief priests, scribes, and elders came to him and said, by what authority are you doing all these crazy things? What are they referring to? Crazy things that Jesus has just been doing. Oh, just kind of banging down some doors in the temple banks and turning over some tables. Kind of nice Christian, polite stuff like that. So they want to know, what in the world are you doing? And these are the same people here. And they understand that he's talking about them just as he is talking to them. And so he asks them, now what do you reckon the owner will do? Now do you think these fellas, because they're fellas, these blokes, do you think these blokes are tenant farmers or absentee landlords? Probably more likely to be absentee landlords. And in fact, that was the economic structure, particularly of Jerusalem and its ruling priestly scribal elite, is that they were large landowners. That's one of the reasons they got the positions. And those lands were in all the outlying areas, so they had this kind of business based in Melbourne. What do you reckon they're going to do? He says, wink, wink, nod, nod. As if to say, you know precisely what people like that do, don't you? What would you do? Well, what do absentee landlords do? Send in the marshals, send in the army, muster up a squad of goons, go break up the revolt, go bust the union. Go get the squatters off the land. Anything but go themselves, right? After all, they're absentee landlords. The owner comes and destroys. See, this vineyard is destroyed in Isaiah 5 by God. Who are the tenants in Jesus' parable? See, this is the twist on the parable. The parable is supposed to be all of Israel. But the tenant twist is that it's been leased out to people who are supposedly acting in the name of. And those people, we are explicitly told, who understand that this is being told about them. In other words, the leadership of Israel has been named by Jesus as rebellious tenants. In other words, what he's done is he has reversed reality. He says, you landowners know what you would do in this kind of situation. Here, that's the good news if you're a landowner. But here's the bad news. You are the man. You are the tenants. How does life look from that angle? This whole time you've been scheming on this land just like your tenants scheme on you. In other words, just as farmers know about the rough go of dry soil farming in chapter 4, so do absentee landlords know about rebellious tenants.